Canada's rail dispute deepens this Friday night. From lockouts to walkouts, the union battles back against binding arbitration.
This is not over.
The new deadline to strike a deal and keep the economy on track. Maintaining momentum, Kamala Harris's first major test and her warning to supporters. Whooping cough cases are climbing. The symptoms and doctor's advice. Plus, standing tall.
I never thought I would be able to have this experience.
The robots helping kids to take their first step.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin again with that unprecedented labor dispute involving this country's two major railways. It remains unclear tonight how and when train service will get back on track. Yesterday, hours after 9,300 workers were locked out, the federal government intervened. The labor minister issued a directive for employees to return to work and for binding arbitration to force a settlement. But the union is now pushing back, challenging that decision at the Labor Relations Board and issuing a new strike notice with a deadline of Monday morning. Heidi Petracek has been tracking these fast-moving developments. Heidi.
Well, Jeff, some CN trains started to move this morning in what seemed like a positive sign, but it didn't take long before what looked like progress ground to a halt.
Even as Canadian National Railway trains were on the move again and CN picket lines gone,
This is not over.
the Rail Workers Union told a Calgary rally the national rail dispute is far from over. The Teamsters Canada Rail Conference intends to challenge the federal minister's move to invoke his power to seek binding arbitration through Canada's Industrial Relations Board.
We believe that the Supreme Court decision regarding our right to strike, it's a constitutional right, and we believe that the application of Article 107 is not valid.
And so the union issued a 72-hour strike notice to CN mid-morning to withdraw the services of our combined membership effective 10 Eastern, Monday, the 26th of August.
The fact is the Industrial Relations Board has to determine whether this is a true impasse or allow a strike or a lockout to proceed in order to compel the parties to actually get a deal.
The arbitration, by the way, was not a great option, but it was probably their best bad option. And there's going to be, it looks like there's going to be real problems with that too.
Meanwhile, workers with Canadian Pacific Kansas City remained off the job Friday. With millions of dollars on the line, industries are worried both rail lines could shut down again.
We have the ability to withstand a stoppage for a short period of time, but every day it gets exponentially worse.
Players on both sides accusing the other of acting in bad faith. Union leaders hinting at taking the fight south of the border.
If you choose to do the wrong thing, we will extend picket lines in the United States if we have to, whether it's legal or not legal.
The Minister of Labour has said he will be looking into just how things got to this point to try to prevent any future simultaneous rail stoppages. Jeff.
Heidi Petracek in Halifax. Thanks, Heidi. And coming up a little later, we'll dive deeper into what's driving Canada's labour unrest after a slew of recent strikes and lockouts. But first, we have breaking news from Germany tonight. At least 3 people are dead and 4 others seriously injured in a stabbing spree. The attack happened in a market square in the northwest city of Zulingen during a festival celebrating its 650th anniversary. Local press reports say witnesses described a man wielding a knife who started attacking people seemingly at random. A manhunt is now underway with the suspect believed to be on the run. Turning to the U.S., where several Secret Service agents are now facing disciplinary action for their involvement in that July campaign rally where Donald Trump was nearly assassinated. At least 5 agents are reportedly now on administrative leave. That includes the head of the Secret Service Pittsburgh field office responsible for the event's security. The agency has faced intense scrutiny for failing to stop the gunman before he shot at Trump with a rifle from a nearby rooftop. The former president was injured and 1 spectator was killed. Trump just received a major endorsement from controversial independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration. We were aligned with each other on other key issues.
Kennedy announcing today he is suspending his campaign, but not dropping out entirely, only withdrawing his name from ballots in battleground states. He's trailing in a distant third place in most polls with roughly 5% of national support. There are reports he offered both Trump and Harris campaigns his endorsement in exchange for a cabinet position. The 70-year-old is the son of famous Democrat lawmaker Robert F. Kennedy and nephew to the late President John F. Kennedy. 5 of his siblings released a joint statement condemning his Trump endorsement, calling it a betrayal of their family's values. The potential impact of that endorsement remains unclear, but Trump will certainly welcome the support after a big week for his Democratic opponent Kamala Harris. Last night, the newly minted presidential nominee closed out the party's national convention with a rousing speech, painting a stark contrast with her Republican rival.
In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
Harris also appealed to voters beyond her party, promising to be a president for all Americans, a strategy to sway undecided voters with just a few months to go before that election. Jackson Proskow joins me now from Chicago. So, Jackson, what's next for Harris and the campaign?
Well, Jeff, in many ways, last night was Kamala Harris's reintroduction to the American people, a chance for her to make her case to independents and even Republicans who might not be sure whether they can support her. Her next big test will come in early September when she has her first presidential debate against Donald Trump. And this is going to feel so different from the Trump-Biden debate we saw earlier this summer. It's also going to be sort of the first chance for Harris to be pressed on where she stands on the issues. And we didn't hear a lot of specific policy proposals in her speech last night, so this will be something different. She really has to make every day count from this point going forward. There are just over 70 days until Election Day, and that's a historically short runway for any presidential candidate, let alone one who is essentially introducing herself to the American people for the first time.
And Jackson, even before the convention this week, Harris had enjoyed weeks of excitement over her candidacy. How does she maintain that momentum?
Well, she really warned her supporters that they can't afford to get complacent, that despite all of their excitement, the hard work is only just beginning. Look, polls show she has made this a dead heat with Donald Trump, and that is a remarkable accomplishment in just over a month. But there's still so much time between now and November, and she has to run a really, really disciplined campaign if she's going to keep this up. She has already found a way to kind of box Trump in because he hasn't yet adapted his strategy to campaign against her. He's still running the same campaign he was expecting to run against Joe Biden. If he doesn't change course, that's going to make the contrast between the two of them all the more stark. It makes her come across as fresh and different, and that's something that works in her favor. Jeff?
Jackson Proskow in Chicago. Thanks, Jackson. In her speech, Kamala Harris also pledged to rescue Israeli hostages and to end the war in Gaza. The United Nations said today that 90% of Gaza's 2 million residents have been displaced by the fighting, and they now face a new threat, polio. The World Health Organization reporting today that a 10-month-old baby has been paralyzed by the virus. Polio is highly contagious and most often spreads through sewage and contaminated water. Gaza had not recorded a case in 25 years, but the debilitating disease was detected in wastewater there back in June. The UN has been calling for a pause in fighting to allow aid and a polio vaccination campaign for children. Doctors here in Canada are sounding the alarm over a spike in cases of whooping cough. New Brunswick has declared a province-wide outbreak after cases there climbed to 4 times the provincial average so far this year. And with the new school year just around the corner, people are being urged to get vaccinated. Anna Mandan reports.
Angel Dixon has 2 young children, aged 3 and 7. But this year, on top of school supplies and new shoes, she'll have one more thing on her mind: whooping cough.
She's a smaller school, so I'm not too concerned about a lot of exposure, I guess. But we'll just take precautions, I guess, every day.
As of August 22nd, the province has recorded 141 cases this year. The 5-year provincial average is 34 cases per year. New Brunswick isn't alone. There have been over 150 cases in eastern Newfoundland, 470 in Ontario, and thousands of cases in Quebec. New Brunswick's chief medical officer of health isn't surprised. He says the disease, also known as pertussis, tends to become more active every 5 to 7 years.
We've had a lot of activity close to us, and knowing that our last provincial outbreak dates back to 2012, we knew that we were potentially going to see some increased activity here as well.
For young children and babies, the disease can be very serious. That's why the province is reminding everyone, especially pregnant mothers and caregivers of young children, to keep up to date on their vaccines.
For those that do contract pertussis, typically if the vaccine didn't protect you from infection, it certainly helps to reduce some of the symptoms or the severity of the symptoms.
Whooping cough begins like a cold and then develops into coughing spells that end with a high-pitched noise or a whoop. For Dixon and her children, they're up to date on the vaccine, and masks will again become part of the routine.
I know I'll have hers out and ready again with her bag.
Dr. Legere says the disease has been found across all age groups this year, but the majority are 10 to 19 years old. Anna Mandan, Global News, Fredericton.
A major shipping channel in southern Quebec is partially blocked tonight after a cargo ship ran aground in the St. Lawrence Seaway. The Dutch vessel was heading on a transatlantic journey to Spain. It lost power on Thursday night and stalled along Montreal's south shore. The ship's hull appears to be undamaged. Tugboats are towing the cargo ship, and the Seaway authorities expect to have the channel reopened by tomorrow morning. The body of 18-year-old Hannah Lynch has now been recovered from that sunken luxury yacht off Sicily. She and her father, British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch, were among 7 people killed when the boat went down in a fierce pre-dawn storm on Monday. The ship's Canadian-born chef, Ricardo Thomas, also died. Police are now investigating how the vessel went down and are not ruling out criminal charges. 15 people survived, including the ship's captain. Frightening moments caught on camera in Malaysia's capital. Coming up, what happened when this street suddenly caved in? This volcano put on an impressive show last night, lighting up the sky over southwestern Iceland. The eruption followed a series of strong earthquakes. A nearby fishing village was evacuated, but is expected to escape unscathed. This is the volcano's 6th eruption since December. And take a look at this video from a street in Malaysia's capital, Kuala Lumpur. A woman is swallowed up by a sinkhole as the pavement suddenly collapses beneath her feet. People rushed to help her. At first glance, the sinkhole didn't appear that big, but it's actually 8 meters deep. It's believed the 48-year-old woman, a tourist from India, was swept away via an underground current. So far, she's not been found. Ukraine received a controversial visitor today. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv, saying he was ready to help Ukraine as a friend to reach a peace deal with Russia. That bilateral relationship has been under strain after Modi's earlier meeting with another world leader. Redmond Shannon explains.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Kyiv, consoling Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as the two leaders visit an exhibit in memory of the children killed in Russia's invasion. This venue for Modi's visit, chosen by Kyiv, just 6 weeks after Narendra Modi embraced Vladimir Putin on a day when Russia bombed a Ukrainian children's hospital. A hug described by Zelensky at the time as a huge disappointment. On this, the first visit of an Indian leader to an independent Ukraine, Modi told Zelensky he would be happy to play a personal role in finding peace, reiterating his position that talks are the only way to a resolution. India has not criticized Russia's 2022 invasion and has since become the biggest buyer of Russian oil, although it has maintained a more neutral position than China.
I think that's what India has been trying to do. We are trying to find a niche, a space in which we can talk to everybody, in which we can deal with everybody.
The two leaders issued a joint statement which included a call to respect countries' territorial integrity, that heralded by Zelensky as a message of support.
You're a big country, you have big influence, and you can stop Putin.
At an international peace summit in June, India chose not to put its name to a joint communique that included similar language. It was signed by more than 80 other nations.
Do I think Narendra Modi will sign up to it? No, I don't think they'll join, because the way that India is playing this.
This analyst believes Modi's strategy may be more about positioning himself as a peacemaker to his domestic audience. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
In Afghanistan, the Taliban continues its crackdown on women's rights. The hardline regime, which roared back to power 3 years ago, has now codified a long list of so-called morality rules. They require women to cover their faces and wear loose-fitting clothes that are neither too tight nor too short. And now, even women's voices are considered intimate by law. It's now illegal for Afghan women to sing, recite, or read aloud in public. It's unclear if speaking is also banned. The laws also state that women cannot even look at men, with the exception of family members. Offenders face losing property or spending 3 days in detention. Labor unrest still ahead. What's driving the wave of high-profile job action in Canada? Returning now to our top story, the national rail dispute is just the latest high-profile work stoppage to hit this country. Canada faced similar challenges last year when BC port workers walked off the job. Nurses, teachers, and pilots have all taken to the picket lines. Nathaniel Dove looks at what's driving this wave of unrest.
One of Canada's railways is returning to work.
Their demands are unacceptable, and this is why we are where we are right now.
The other, Canadian Pacific Kansas City, still isn't running. It's the latest disruption after nearly 2 years of labor disputes across the country. Like WestJet, nurses in Quebec, and BC port workers last year. Job action across different sectors, but experts say there's likely a common cause.
This is workers trying to claw their way back from this huge increase in prices.
This economist says the prescription can lead to picket lines.
One of the solutions to inflation is higher wages. But to get to those higher wages often involves conflict.
Global News crunched the data. This line shows the number of hours not worked due to labor disputes. The red line is the prime interest rate, which responds to inflation. They nearly match.
In the last couple of years, we've seen a return, at least temporarily, to those 1970s, 1980s style inflation numbers. And you see the 1970s, 1980s style responses.
There are some differences. Unions were stronger in the 70s and 80s, but lately the pandemic and war in Ukraine forced rates to rise again. And there's another reason, Moshe Lander says: oligarchies.
WestJet and Air Canada then have a tremendous amount of leverage over their pilots, because if you don't like it, what's your option? To go work for the other company?
Government intervention hopefully avoids broader economic pain, but may just delay the issue again.
The long-term consequence then is that you're going to have to pay your workers more if you want to draw them into the industry, which is exactly what they're striking for.
Federal arbitration helped Air Canada pilots about 10 years ago. They may return to the picket lines next month. Nathaniel Dove, Global News, Toronto.
Making a stand. Up next, the robotic tool offering kids with disabilities an extraordinary experience. The Windsor Spitfires junior hockey team just drafted a new star. Hollywood actor Keano Reeves signed a one-day contract with the club to help raise money for mental health. Reeves, who grew up in Toronto, actually tried out for the Spitfires as a goalie 4 decades ago, but an injury kept him from playing. Autographed items are now being auctioned off, with all proceeds going to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Well, it was an emotional experience for a group of kids in Halifax today, offered the opportunity to do something most of us take for granted. Robotic technology allowed them to ditch their wheelchairs for a day, stand up, and walk. Emma Convey was there.
Tears of joy, happiness, and pride from parents watching their children take their first steps on their own.
Being able to see her run and walk really fast and do really well is
I'm trying not to cry, but amazing.
The Trexo robots are sized to the children's weight and height. Kids are strapped in, and the robotic legs do the walking, with someone else at the controls until the child can take over and initiate.
I love it. They can sort of work with a child's range of motion and their strength and their muscle tone, and they're so customizable. They can be modified for really any child.
It's a great way to be able to get these kids involved in ways that they're not able to, not just physically, but socially.
The robot can be used as a physio tool or to help with daily living. It's programmed to detect how much effort the individual is putting in and can provide more or less support depending on their need.
I feel amazing.
Truthfully, I never thought I would be able to have this experience. It is a mind-blowing experience being able to have this opportunity and to be able to have the chance to be able to walk.
The robots themselves range from $35,000 to $40,000 and are one of a kind. The company is working to get coverage from provincial governments to alleviate financial pressures on families. In the meantime, parents have to cover the cost themselves.
A lot of fundraising, a lot of benefits, do what I have to do. I'll get it done. She's everything to me.
But for these kids, the chance to walk means everything.
Being a 16-year-old in a wheelchair, there's always a boundary in the way. And I am a strong advocate for every child with a disability to be able to do their dream. And this is one of my dreams that came true today.
Emma Convey, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is the colorful boats of Port de Grave, Newfoundland and Labrador. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.